Picture this, you wake up every morning with good intentions. You've got your goals written down, your plans mapped out, maybe even a vision board on your wall. Yet somehow, weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and you're still in the same place. You keep telling yourself you'll start tomorrow, next week, next month. But deep down, there's this gnawing feeling that something invisible is holding you back, something you can't quite put your finger on. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people around the world experience this exact same feeling of being stuck, and most of them blame external circumstances, lack of motivation, or simply bad luck. But what if I told you that the real reason you're stuck has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with a hidden part of your psyche that you've been running from your entire life? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, spent decades studying why people get trapped in cycles of stagnation and self-sabotage. What he discovered was so profound that it completely revolutionized our understanding of human behavior. And the best part? Once you understand what he uncovered, you'll finally have the key to breaking free from whatever's been holding you back. The truth is, you're not stuck because you lack willpower or because the universe is conspiring against you. You're stuck because there's a part of yourself that you've been desperately trying to avoid, and that avoidance is creating an internal war that's draining all your energy and keeping you paralyzed. Jung called this hidden part of ourselves the shadow, and according to him, until you face it, you'll remain trapped in patterns that seem to repeat no matter how hard you try to change. But here's what makes this even more interesting. Jung didn't just identify the problem. He mapped out the exact process by which people can break free from these invisible chains. He called it individuation, and it's arguably the most important psychological concept you've never heard of. Today, we're going to dive deep into Jung's revolutionary insights and explore why facing your shadow might be the most important thing you ever do. Let's start with a question that might make you uncomfortable. What parts of yourself do you hate the most? What qualities, traits, or tendencies do you judge harshest in other people? Your answer to this question is the key to understanding why you're stuck, because according to Jung, the things we despise most in others are often the very things we're refusing to acknowledge in ourselves. Jung observed that we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to maintain an idealized image of who we think we are or who we think we should be. We want to see ourselves as good, moral, competent, and likable, so we unconsciously repress or deny any aspects of our personality that don't fit this idealized self-image. These repressed aspects don't disappear. They form what Jung called the shadow. As Jung explained, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. This shadow contains not just our negative traits, but also our unrealized potential, our authentic desires, and paradoxically, some of our greatest strengths that we've disowned because they didn't fit with how we thought we should be. Here's where it gets fascinating. When we refuse to acknowledge our shadow, it doesn't just quietly sit in the background, it actively works against our conscious goals and intentions. It sabotages our efforts, creates internal conflicts, and manifests as that mysterious resistance that keeps us stuck. You know that feeling when you want to do something, but somehow can't bring yourself to do it. That's often your shadow at work. Think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to drive a car, but you have one foot on the gas pedal and the other on the brake. You're putting in effort, the engine is running, but you're not moving forward. This is exactly what happens when our conscious mind sets goals and intentions, but our unconscious shadow is working against us. We end up exhausted from the internal struggle, wondering why we can't seem to make progress despite our best efforts. Jung understood that most people experience this internal conflict without realizing what's happening. They blame their lack, of progress on external factors or personal shortcomings, never suspecting that the real battle is happening within their own psyche. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung warned, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is why traditional self-help advice often fails. When someone tells you to just be more disciplined or think more positively, they're addressing only half of the equation. They're speaking to your conscious mind while completely ignoring the shadow that might be actively working against your conscious intentions. It's like trying to fix a car's performance problems by polishing the exterior while ignoring the engine trouble under the hood. But Jung's insights go even deeper. He realized that our shadow doesn't just contain negative traits, it often contains our greatest unrealized potential. Many of the qualities we've repressed are actually strengths that we learned to hide because they didn't fit with our family's expectations, our culture's norms, or our own rigid ideas about who we should be. For instance, maybe you grew up in a family that valued compliance and harmony, so you learned to suppress your natural assertiveness and leadership qualities. These traits didn't disappear, they went into your shadow. Now, as an adult, you might find yourself consistently avoiding leadership opportunities or feeling uncomfortable when you need to assert yourself, even when the situation clearly calls for it. Your conscious mind might want to step up and take charge, but your shadow is holding you back because it contains those disowned leadership qualities. Or perhaps you were raised to believe that being emotional or sensitive was a weakness, so you learned to suppress those aspects of yourself. Now you might find yourself struggling in relationships or feeling disconnected from your own feelings, even though emotional intelligence and sensitivity could be some of your greatest strengths if you owned them. Jung noticed that this process of disowning parts of ourselves doesn't just limit our potential. It creates a deep sense of inauthenticity that leaves us feeling empty and stuck. When we're constantly trying to be someone we're not, while refusing to acknowledge who we actually are, we lose touch with our authentic selves and our genuine desires. We end up pursuing goals that don't truly align with our nature, which is why our efforts often feel forced and why we struggle to maintain motivation over time. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes crucial. Individuation is the process of integrating all aspects of ourselves, including our shadow, into a coherent and authentic whole. It's about becoming who we truly are, rather than who we think we should be, or who others expect us to be. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But individuation isn't just about self-acceptance in some superficial sense. It's about developing the courage to honestly examine all aspects of our personality, including the parts we'd rather not acknowledge. It requires us to question our assumptions about ourselves and to be willing to discover that we might be quite different from who we thought we were. This process can be uncomfortable, even frightening, because it challenges our established identity and forces us to confront aspects of ourselves we've been avoiding. But Jung believed this discomfort was necessary for psychological growth and authentic living. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, he observed. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. One of the most powerful ways to begin identifying your shadow is to pay attention to your emotional reactions to other people. Jung noticed that we tend to project our disowned shadow qualities onto others, which is why certain people trigger such strong reactions in us. When someone irritates, disgusts, or angers you disproportionately, there's a good chance they're displaying a quality that exists in your own shadow. This doesn't mean that everyone who annoys you is simply reflecting your shadow back to you. Sometimes people are genuinely problematic, but when your emotional reaction seems disproportionate to the situation, or when you find yourself repeatedly encountering the same types of people who trigger you, it's worth examining what these people might be showing you about yourself. For example, if you find yourself consistently irritated by people who you perceive as selfish or self-centered, it might be worth exploring whether you've disowned your own healthy self-interest. Maybe you were taught that putting yourself first was wrong, so you learned to suppress your natural self-advocacy. Now, when you see others freely expressing self-interest, it triggers you because it represents something you've forbidden yourself to express. Or, if you're constantly frustrated by people who seem lazy or unmotivated, you might be projecting your own disowned desire for rest and relaxation. Perhaps you've built your identity around being productive and hard-working, pushing your natural need for downtime into your shadow. When you see others relaxing or taking it easy, it unconsciously reminds you of the part of yourself you've been denying. Jung also observed that our shadow often emerges in our dreams, in moments of stress or when we're tired and our usual defenses are down. These are the times when our carefully constructed persona slips and we get glimpses of the aspects of ourselves we normally keep hidden. Rather than being embarrassed by these moments, Jung suggested we could use them as valuable information about our shadow content. The key insight here is that integrating your shadow doesn't mean acting on every impulse or embracing destructive behaviors. It means acknowledging all aspects of yourself with honesty and compassion, and then consciously choosing how to express them in healthy ways. When you stop fighting against parts of yourself, you free up enormous amounts of energy that were previously being used to maintain internal conflicts. This is why people who do shadow work often report sudden bursts of creativity, motivation, and clarity. They're no longer spending their energy on internal battles, so they have more resources available for pursuing their actual goals. It's like finally taking your foot off the brake and discovering how much power your engine actually has. Jung understood that this process of integration leads to what he called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradoxes and contradictions within yourself without being torn apart by them. This is crucial for psychological maturity because human beings are inherently complex and contradictory. We all contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman put it, and trying to present a perfectly consistent, simplified version of ourselves to the world is both exhausting and inauthentic. When you can acknowledge that you contain both generous and selfish impulses, both confident and insecure aspects, both loving and aggressive tendencies, you stop being at war with yourself. You can then consciously choose which aspects to express in different situations, rather than being driven by unconscious forces you don't understand. This integration also leads to what Jung called psychological wholeness, a state where you're operating from your authentic self rather than from a fragmented persona. When you're psychologically whole, your goals and actions naturally align because they're emerging from your true nature rather than from ideas about who you should be. This alignment eliminates much of the internal resistance that keeps people stuck. But Jung's insights about the shadow go beyond individual psychology. He also understood that entire cultures and societies have collective shadows, aspects of human nature that are collectively denied or repressed. These collective shadows manifest as social problems, conflicts, and the tendency to demonize other groups while maintaining an idealized image of our own group. This is why shadow work isn't just personally transformative, it's socially crucial. When individuals take responsibility for their own shadows, they stop projecting their disowned qualities onto others, which reduces conflict and increases understanding. And Jung observed, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The process of individuation that Jung described isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey of continued self-discovery and integration. There will always be new aspects of yourself to discover and integrate as you grow and encounter new situations. But once you understand the basic principle that wholeness comes from integration rather than perfection, the process becomes less frightening and more like an adventure. So how do you actually begin this work of shadow integration? Jung suggested several approaches. First, pay careful attention to your projections. When you find yourself having strong reactions to other people, ask yourself what they might be showing you about yourself. This requires genuine self-honesty and a willingness to discover things about yourself that might be uncomfortable. Second, examine your dreams and pay attention to the characters that appear in them. Jung believed that dream figures often represent different aspects of our psyche, including shadow elements. The people you dislike or fear in your dreams might represent parts of yourself you're avoiding. Third, notice the patterns in your life. What situations do you repeatedly find yourself in? What types of conflicts keep emerging? What goals do you set but somehow never achieve? These patterns often point to shadow dynamics that are operating below the surface of your awareness. Fourth, practice what Jung called active imagination, a technique where you dialogue with different aspects of your psyche as if they were separate entities. This can help you understand and integrate parts of yourself that have been operating autonomously in your shadow. Most importantly, approach this work with compassion for yourself. Jung emphasized that shadow integration isn't about judging or trying to eliminate parts of yourself. It's about bringing them into conscious awareness so you can work with them rather than being driven by them unconsciously. As Jung beautifully expressed it, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this terror is matched by an equally profound liberation. When you stop running from yourself, you discover that much of what you were afraid of wasn't as terrible as you imagined. You also discover strengths and potentials you never knew you had. The person who undertakes this journey of individuation doesn't become perfect. They become whole. They don't eliminate their flaws. They integrate them consciously. They don't become someone else. They become more fully themselves. And in becoming more fully themselves, they naturally align with their authentic path and find that the mysterious resistance that kept them stuck begins to dissolve. Jung understood that this path requires courage, because it means giving up the comfortable illusions we maintain about ourselves and embracing the full complexity of our human nature. But he also knew that this courage is rewarded with a life of greater authenticity, deeper relationships, and genuine fulfillment. The reason you keep feeling stuck isn't because you're broken or because life is unfair. It's because there's a part of you that's been waiting in the shadows to be acknowledged and integrated. When you finally turn toward your shadow with curiosity rather than fear, you'll discover that it contains not just your greatest challenges, but also your greatest potential. As Jung reminds us, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. The time has come to stop looking outside for the source of your problems and the solution to your stuckness. The answers you've been seeking are within you, waiting to be discovered in the very places you've been afraid to look. The journey of individuation that Jung mapped out isn't easy, but it's the most important work you'll ever do. Because when you finally become who you truly are, rather than who you think you should be, you'll find that life stops feeling like a constant struggle against invisible forces. Instead, it becomes an expression of your authentic nature, and that's when real progress becomes not just possible but inevitable. Remember, you're not stuck because you lack something external. You're stuck because you've been running from something internal. But once you stop running and start integrating, you'll discover that everything you need to move forward has been with you all along, waiting in your shadow to be reclaimed and consciously expressed. The journey begins with a single step, the willingness to honestly examine all aspects of yourself, including the parts you'd rather not see. From there, as Jung promised, the path toward wholeness and authentic living will reveal itself. And when you finally arrive at that place of integration, you'll understand why the journey through the shadow was not just necessary, but the greatest gift you could give yourself.